update for OIC of America affiliates hosted by National Skills Coalition. For those unfamiliar with National Skills Coalition, we have a vision of an America that grows its economy by investing in its people so that every worker and every industry has the skills to compete and prosper. We do this by organizing broad-based coalitions seeking to raise the skills of America's workers across a range of industries, by advocating for public policies that invest in what works, as informed by our members' real-world expertise, and by communicating these goals to an American public seeking a vision for a strong U.S. economy that allows everyone to be a part of its success. Before I hand things over to Tony, I would like to take a moment to thank all of our financial supporters calling in today. These webinar updates are among the many state and federal policy resources that National Skills Coalition provides for those in the workforce field and are made possible by the generosity of our foundation and philanthropic partners, organizational supporting members, and individual donors. With that, I would like to turn things over to Tony Ross to get us started. Tony?
Thank you very much. And first, thank you to our friends and partners at the National Skills Coalition for partnering with us today to have this opportunity and have this conversation and dialogue. And well, good afternoon to the OIC family. As many in the OIC family know, and maybe our friends at the National Skills Coalition may not know, OIC has a long tradition in history in terms of public policy and public policy engagement. Our founder, Reverend Leon Sullivan, by my count, engaged at least 6 U.S. presidents. In addition, he had an MOU agreement with the National Black Caucus of State Legislators and did many other things in terms of public policy, U.S. Department of Labor. And right now, we in the OIC family are trying to re-energize and revive that tradition in our movement. I want to thank Newton Sandin, our EBA convener and leader in South Florida, who organized the first OIC Day, Federal National Day on the Hill in many, many decades with our national office. We've recently had 2 state-level days on the Hill in Connecticut and Pennsylvania, and now we're having this webinar with our thought partners at the National Skills Coalition. So I think we're well on our way to reclaiming our historic role in terms of public policy. I would encourage you to take the link to this webinar when it's available to you later this week and forward it to your board members and supporters as well as a way to keep the engagement going. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Angela Hanks, who will begin with the content of the presentation.
Hi, Tony. Thank you. So we can jump right into starting with the Workforce Investment Act. So as many of you I'm sure have heard by now, after just a short 11 years, we finally have a bipartisan, bicameral agreement on reauthorization. Members of Congress, both in the Senate and the House, came out with this agreement about a month ago, and there's strong support for it, so it looks like we will have a new WIA law in the near future. So this new authorization is the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, so WIOA, rather than WIA. And you can go to the next slide. So this WIA bill is, as I said, bipartisan, bicameral, has support from leadership in both the House and the Senate, which is always a positive sign for moving it quickly and without relatively little controversy. It reauthorizes the Workforce Investment Act for 6 years, so through 2020, and it generally focuses on streamlining programs, reporting, and administration. Overall, this bill, it does make some changes to current law, but it doesn't radically change the structure of current law. So there are still 4 titles. So we have Title I, which covers occupational training, Title II, adult basic education, Title III, Wagner-Pizer, and finally vocational rehabilitation. It also maintains the same funding structure, so the 3 formula streams, the adult, dislocated worker, and youth funding streams. And importantly, it doesn't create a block grant or otherwise consolidate existing funding streams. The House bill that was introduced last year would have consolidated 35 programs into a single workforce investment fund, essentially block granting the program. So it's important to note that this bipartisan bill does not do that. However, as a compromise, moving away from those 35 consolidated programs. WIOA does eliminate 15 existing programs. So the programs you'll see here that are highlighted in red are all programs that have recently been funded. So we'll be losing funding for all of those programs. The ones that are in black have not been funded in recent years, and the programs that are in blue are vocational and rehabilitation titles. So particularly when you're looking at number 12, the migrant and seasonal farm workers, that is the program under Title IV, not the larger program under Title II. So some key changes to the infrastructure of WIA. So overall, there is generally the same structure of the workforce investment boards. There's still a business majority and there's still a business chair. However, the WIOA does reduce the required numbers of the workforce investment board. It also creates a new unified state plan for all core programs, which includes adult basic ed. Local plans must also be aligned with state plans. This new unified state plan also comes with unified performance measures, which I'll talk about in a bit as well. And then for the American Job Centers or one-stops, there's a new requirement that states must assess effectiveness, accessibility, and continuous improvement at least every 3 years. So some key employment and activities changes. Like I said, there are some changes to the performance measures. So WIOA establishes common measures across all of the core programs. So these measures are similar to what exists right now using the waivers that DOL has given out. So I think all but one state are actually using some relatively similar version of the common measure right now. One change under WIOA is this new indicator of effectiveness in serving employers. So the bill is written is somewhat vague on what that means. So that measure of effectiveness in serving employers is something that will get worked out once the law is passed and they move to the regulatory process. So that's something DOL will define through regulation. The bill also codifies the elimination of the sequence of services. DOL has put out some guidance in the past, but this just makes the statutory change to make it clear that there is not a requirement for the sequence of services. In addition, it also eliminates the core and intensive services steps and instead consolidates them into a new career services category. Many of the activities that were considered core and intensive are still there, but it's just simplified under this more broad career services category. The bill also signals to states and local areas that they should be engaging in some of the existing best practices that have come about since WIA was last passed in 1998. So this includes utilizing and developing career pathways, sector partnerships, and credential attainment linked to in-demand occupations. On sector partnerships, I'll note that a new requirement under the bill is that local boards convene, use, or develop sector partnerships. Again, it's hard to know what that means in practice, but there is, it is an important signal there that they do want to see greater use of sector partnerships in the field. So some key funding changes. One is that the statewide set-aside, which is currently at 8.75% as of the last appropriations bill and the one before it as well, would be restored to 15%. WIOA also sets funding levels for a number of programs that are authorized under the bill, including all of the formula programs. So under current law, such sums is the term of art that's used to authorize funding levels, and essentially that means that the appropriators then get to decide the funding levels for each specific year. So in WIOA, the funding levels for each year through 2020 are actually written out. However, it is important to note that these are authorization levels. Ultimately, the authorizers can only recommend what the funding levels should be, but it's the appropriators that actually get to decide how much money each of these programs get. So even though there are slight increases each year from 15 to 20, from FY15 to 20 in funding, it doesn't necessarily mean that those increases will happen, particularly because we're under this very difficult funding climate with the budgetary caps that were established by the Budget Control Act in 2011 and sequestration, which we've been under for 2 years now. It's hard to see a situation where funding could be increased because of the caps and because of the sequester. So despite this really what is an important signal from the authorizers that these programs should be funded at higher levels, it's difficult to imagine a way that the appropriators could actually allocate the funding that's been recommended in the bill. I'll also make a similar point on the statewide set-aside. Although the authorizers restore it to 15%, there's no guarantee that it won't be, in previous years it's been reduced by appropriations. There's no guarantee that that won't happen again. But once again, it is a signal that from the experts on these, on the programmatic side, that these programs need to be better funded and that they need to be better supported by appropriations. So that was sort of a broad strokes analysis of the major changes between current law and WIOA. National Skills Coalition has put together this side-by-side comparison of key provisions in Titles 1 and 2 of the bill, comparing it to current law and the previous House and Senate bills. That's available on our website at www.nationalskillscoalition.org if you're interested in taking a deeper dive. So now that we have this bill and it's bipartisan, bicameral with support from leadership, the next thing is actually passing it. So the Senate bill, which was, there was a House and Senate bill for WIA, and this is the bipartisan compromise that came of it. The Senate never actually passed a bill, so they will pass this bipartisan measure, and then it will move over to the House for approval. So the Senate reached an agreement late last week on passage, and actually we just found out today, it will not be voted on today, but it will be voted on tomorrow afternoon, so we could have a WIA bill clearing the Senate sometime mid to late afternoon tomorrow, so that's something to keep an eye out for. So once it moves from the Senate, it will have to go back to the House. How it will move in the House is a little less clear due to some leadership changes over there. It's been a little bit difficult to predict what they'll do and how the House will proceed on a range of issues, certainly not just WIOA. So we've heard positive things from leadership over on the House side that they will be able to get this passed quickly, but ultimately it will depend on politics much kind of more elevated than WIA is. So we'll keep an eye on that, but the good news is WIA is not incredibly high profile, so it could manage to squeak out despite some of the upheaval over in the House. So moving on to funding, so the fiscal year F15 begins October 1st. So right now appropriators are working on legislation to fund programs authorized by federal legislation. So there are 12 appropriations bills. The Labor H Bill, as it's called, which funds most workforce development programs, is typically usually the most controversial. It also funds education and healthcare, and for those reasons sometimes tends to be the most difficult bill to pass. So the House and Senate are both working on them. It's unclear whether the House will come out with a bill at all, and the Senate has been delayed for various reasons, but we'll be monitoring that as they go forward. There is a little bit more certainty with this year. There was some sequester relief that was granted last year that is for fiscal year 14 and for 15. The relief that was granted in fiscal year 14 was greater than it will be for this coming year. So the appropriators are going to have to make some tough decisions. Once again, a number of deserving programs, and there's just less money to go around. And at this point, because of the cycle of cuts, all of the really easy cuts have already been made. So now they're really facing some difficult choices over how to allocate a really limited amount of resources. So It's unclear what will happen in fiscal year 15. They have to pass something to fund the government by October 1, or we'll end up in a situation like last year. Something like that seems very unlikely. But what's more likely is that they'll pass a stopgap bill that will fund the government until they can reach a broader agreement on all 12 appropriations bills. Something to keep in mind, FY16 is even more uncertain. We can go to the next slide. So like I said, there is sequester relief that was available in FY14 and FY15, but in FY16, the full sequester kicks back in. And NDD programs you'll see here, which is non-defense discretionary, so the programs you typically think of as government, so public health, public safety, education, job training. Those programs will be funded below what they were in FY13. The 2016 sequester, if implemented, would also put funding for these programs, NDD programs, at a historic low as a share of GDP since this has been tracked, so since the early 60s, which means, once again, appropriators will face even more tough choices. We're sort of in this, as a result of various spending cut measures, we're sort of in this cycle where we have these constant crises with funding, and Congress really waits to the last minute to do anything about it. So it's unclear what will happen, but it is something important, even though it's over a year away. It's important to keep an eye out for, because it will come up fairly quickly. So moving on from that sort of negative news, we have some positive movement on workforce development with the administration and the White House. We can go to the next slide. So in the President's State of the Union, he sort of unveiled this broad skills agenda, or this opportunity for all agenda, of which the skills agenda was a part of it. So we're starting to see some of the results of that, and there certainly will be more to come. So right after the State of the Union, the President issued this memorandum directing Vice President Biden to lead an across-the-board review of job training programs. So the main agencies that are involved with this are labor, commerce, and education, in partnership with the Vice President's office, although there are a number of other agencies that have a smaller role. Basically, any agency in the federal government that has some role in job training is involved in some degree. They're really trying to make this very across the board, across agency, although, like I said, these are the three agencies that will take the lead. So the memorandum gave the Vice President 180 days to develop a plan to make workforce and job training more job-driven, integrated, and effective. So this job-driven theme is something that you'll see throughout grant making at the Department of Labor over the past 6 months, and I'm sure it will continue going forward as well. The plan will include concrete steps to reform job training programs and make them more effective and job-driven. So we are nearing the end of the 180 days. So we're about a month out from when this plan will be delivered. It's important to note that this is a plan, but it really represents a starting point. From there on out, this will be something that each of these agencies will be working to implement going forward. So this is really just the jumping off point for this work. While it is a jumping off point, we have seen some new initiatives that are tied to this job-driven theme trickling out of the Department of Labor in particular. So the Ready to Work grants, which came out in February of this year and were actually just due last week. These grants are really important because I think they provide a strong signal of where the administration is headed with this review and how they're thinking about what job-driven training looks like. So these Ready-to-Work grants are designed to serve the long-term unemployed. $150 million was made available out of H-1B visa fees, mostly out of convenience. Those were discretionary funds that were available. And these grants are really designed to support high-performing partnerships between employers, nonprofits, and the public workforce system. They're really looking to engage a number of partners, including employers, in this training. So the Ready-to-Work grants really kicked this off. And sort of, I would say, it didn't even occur to us until we started adding it up. Throughout the year, the administration has actually done about $1 billion in new job-driven grants. So back in the fall, they gave out $107 million in these Youth Career Connect grants, which support partnerships between high schools, industry, and the higher ed and public workforce systems. They recently announced this Registered Apprenticeship College Consortium, which will help registered apprentices receive college credits for their apprenticeship training. They recently announced $450 million in the TACT grants, the Community College TAA grants. Important to note on these, this is the fourth and final round, so there won't be any grants after this unless Congress moves to put something new or similar in place. But these grants are really important. So within each round of TAC grants, the administration is focused more and more on deep employer engagement. And so these grants in particular are really strong on the employer engagement and really emphasize employer engagement through industry or sector partnerships. And then finally, the administration recently announced that in the fall, $100 million will be available for American apprenticeship grants. And really these grants are to scale up apprenticeship models that are working particularly in non-traditional fields. The president has made this, announcement that he'd like to double the number of apprenticeships in the U.S. So this is really just providing some seed money to try to start scaling up the apprenticeship model across the country. So other things, finally, that are happening outside of WIA and funding and outside of the administration, comprehensive immigration reform. This is another instance where I think you can see the ripple effect of some of the leadership changes in the House, but even before that, it was hard to see a path forward this year. I think most members of Congress will agree that it will get done at some point, although this year looks less and less likely as we move forward. One thing that National Skills Coalition has been working on is the skills component within comprehensive immigration reform. So thinking about the impact it will have on the labor market and how we can put more resources toward skilling up low-skilled adults and young people, whether they're immigrants or non-immigrants. Additionally, the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education, formerly OVE, now OCTE, last month released its National Action Plan, which was tied to the Survey of Adult Skills, this PIAC data that the OECD put out in October, which found that 36 million U.S. adults have low basic skills. So this action plan sort of is coming out of that to develop a way to make sure that we have the resources available and are putting money toward the best programs that can provide adults with the education they need to become skilled and get better jobs. So the plan they put out earlier in the year, OCTE put out earlier in the year, is really sort of a broad strokes proposal for how to get this done. They are planning to drill down on this and release a more detailed plan in August. I'll note that these are two different things, this National Action Plan and the across-the-board review that's going on with the Vice President. However, all these agencies are working together, and although they were started by different things, it's hard to imagine that there won't be some connection between what the Vice President comes out with and the work that the Department of Ed is doing to provide better adult education services that lead adults to getting better basic skills and also put them on a career pathway. So I think that's something to look out for. I'm sure there will be a connection between those two things. And I think that's it. So I think we're going to take questions now, and then I'll turn it over to Tony.
Great, thank you. So we're going to open it up for questions now. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and we will open up your lines one at a time. Or you can type a question into the question box. So while we're waiting for hands, we have a question typed in by Jonathan Jacobs. Jonathan asks, what happens with the bill if the Senate passes it, but the House fails to act? And I'm going to direct that to Angela.
Okay. So if they fail to act, then it dies It can be reintroduced, same exact version, in the next Congress, but they will have to, in order for that not to happen, they'll have to pass it by the end of the year. The House has tentatively put this on their schedule for the summer, so I think we'll know pretty quickly whether or not they'll be able to do it. But like I said, I think although it's a little bit shaky, it does seem like there's probably a better chance than not that they will be able to get it done this summer.
Great, thank you. And we have another question here from Ann Levinson. And Ann asks, what actions can our members take to call on the Senate and House to act on the WIOA bill?
So I think there are, you can, obviously today in the Senate, it's probably quickest to call or send an email to your member of Congress, since time is of the essence. But certainly getting into contact with your district offices as well and asking them to support the bill is another effective way, sending letters of support as well. National Skills Coalition does a bunch of actions ourselves, so you're always, if you're on our list, you can participate in the actions that we do as well.
Great, thank you, Angela. And our last question here is from Randall Bacon, and Randall asks, if the WIOA bill passes, when will changes take effect?
So there's a 2-year transition period, so it won't be as soon as it passes. Now you have to go with the new law. There will be a 2-year transition period that will be facilitated by the Department of Labor. So once it passes, they'll come out with guidance and timeline with some more specificity on how that will operate. Plus, they'll have probably, I think, about a year or two that they'll be developing regulations. So it'll take some time to go through the rulemaking process and for those to take effect as well.
I have a quick question for you, Angela.
Mm-hmm.
Someone told me that about 75% of the money in this bill, per se, focuses on the out-of-school youth population. Is that true? And that would be, a lot of that money would come to the local WIB?
So that's true for the youth formula funding. That was a shift in current law, so there is this new focus on out-of-school youth in particular. So yeah, 75% will go to out-of-school youth, but only from the youth stream. And that's the funding going to the locals, yes.
Okay, so that's the clarification I needed. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. And I just wanted to remind everyone that there will be another question and answer period at the end of the call as well. And that's it for the questions for Angela.
Great. Great, thanks, Angela. I will take over as we go along with the webinar. Hi, everyone. This is Andrea Gillespie. I am the Senior Field Organizer for the National Skills Coalition. And as part of my job, I work hand in hand with our members across the country to make sure that they are able and are successful in weighing in both in state and federal policy debates on many of the topics that you've heard from Angela. So as mentioned earlier, if you're not already on our e-listserv, please take a moment to go to our new website at nationalskillscoalition.org and sign up to receive our emails and action alerts. So throughout the year, we will keep you updated through action alerts, e-newsletters, and whatnot about what's happening, especially as it relates to the WIOA bill. And again, as we heard from Angela, and Angela, thank you for that great policy information. There are a number of positive policy developments on the horizon, namely the prospect of the Workforce Investment Act finally being reauthorized after 11 years. And I would say that none of this would have been possible without strong advocacy. National Skills Coalition is over 5,000 members strong across the country, and we invite you to join us in making sure public policies and investments work for all workers and industries. So in the last few minutes of the webinar, I wanted to go over some of our major advocacy opportunities that are open to you. We have a number of affiliated state coalitions working to advance the same types of policies in their state capitals that National Skills Coalition is lifting up on the federal level. Policies that ensure education and training programs meet the needs of industries, that they help workers earn skilled credentials, and also push on public systems to keep better track of how well public investments are equipping workers with skilled credentials. Our coalitions do this through a number of activities, namely by developing and building consensus around shared policy platforms, holding policymaker meetings at their state capitals or doing lobby days, building specific policymaker champions who can then go forth and file bills and advance legislation, and getting their policy messages in the local press, either through special press coverage on their events, a letter to the editor, or op-eds. If you are working in one of the states listed on the slide and want to get involved with the state coalition, please let me know after the webinar, and I'll connect you with the coalition lead. Also, each year the National Skills Coalition brings our members together across the country into Washington, D.C. for our annual Skills Summit. The next summit is scheduled for February 8th through 10th, 2015, and will include a variety of briefings and breakout sessions and discussions on post-secondary education and workforce development policy, as well as funding related to those programs, both on the state and federal level. We'll also have a host of meetings on Capitol Hill where you'll be able to meet with your congressional members and staff. Registration information for that event will be coming out in July. We invite you to consider joining us for that as well. Next slide. This is also an election year with 36 states electing governors come November. So between now and November is a prime opportunity to bring greater attention to the need for skills and investments in skills by asking the candidates about their plans for doing so. As we have seen with the after the 2010 elections, strong candidate education during the election season has led to significant investments in skills in state budgets in the ensuing years for a number of states. Many of our members will be planning events and meeting with their campaigns to better understand the gubernatorial candidates' post-secondary education and workforce development plans. We've put this handy guide together full of ideas and tools on how to get a candidate education strategy off the ground. As you can see a cover of it on the slide. You can also find this toolkit at our website and just go to our landing page and you'll click on the Resources Events tab and then click on the 2014 Skills Summit and you'll be able to find it there. And like I said, it has lots of ideas on how you can engage the candidates and ask them about their plans for skills, whether it's meeting with them, meeting with an editorial board, or hosting some sort of event with the candidates. If you'd like to know what's going on in your state or if something is already underway in terms of a candidate education activity, just shoot me an email and I can let you know. Or if you're interested in doing something on your own, I'd be happy to talk with you about that as well after the webinar. Finally, Congress will be taking their annual August recess in just a month. Members will be back in their states and districts and will be using the time to tour their areas, meet with constituents, and hold town hall meetings. It's a great time to ask for a meeting with your congressional member or staff to discuss what's happening in your community and how federal policy can better support the work you're doing. It's also a great time to invite them to tour your training facility, or if a member is hosting a town hall meeting, it would also be a great opportunity to attend the meeting and see if you can get a question or comment in about skills or federal workforce policy. If you're interested in taking advantage of this opportunity and haven't yet done something or connected with your congressional member and staff during this recess period, definitely feel free to reach out with me. We can help you get started. We can help craft talking points if you are able to get a meeting scheduled, or talk about how to make your site visit go smoothly. So don't be a stranger if that's something you're looking to do come August. That is it as far as advocacy opportunities that I'd like to share with you. Like I said, there's a number of ways to get involved, both in state policy discussions with our state coalitions, as well as federal policy discussions, whether it's attending our Skills Summit in our Skills Summit in February 2015, getting involved during the August recess session, or just getting on our e-news list and taking action on action alerts that we send out from time to time, especially as it relates to WIOA. I'm again going to ask Ashley if there's any questions or comments in the queue, either about what I've shared or Angela's piece about federal policy.
Great. Thank you, Andrea. So we do have one question here from Jennifer Katz. And Jennifer asks, for the site visits, is it best to talk about funding, or should we focus on our amazing work that's being done? We would not like it to be totally negative. So what do you think is your the best way for us to talk about either funding issues or our amazing work that we're doing?
I definitely would lead with talking about the work that you're doing. I think more than anything, what really, and those of you who've been in this situation will probably agree that what tends to get policymakers' attention is your story. And when you're doing a site visit, it's really your story about how your training programs are helping workers either get back into the labor market if they've been out for whatever reason, or get a better job and provide stability and success for their family. They love to hear about how employers are being helped with the training programs by making sure that there's a good pipeline to the skilled workers they need to stay competitive in our marketplace. So I think that's really important. And what a site visit does is that it not only allows you to tell your story in much the same way that you would do in a meeting, but then they can actually see the program in action. So if you're able to arrange a site visit where there is some sort of training going on, whether it's classroom time or time where if you have, training facilities where there's equipment that people practice on and, get experience on, it's great to kind of arrange a site visit where the members and their staff can really see that in action. There usually is always a time during, whether it's a meeting or a site visit, where you tell your story and the member's interested, they want to hear more, and then you get to the point where the member asks, well, what do you need, what can I do? And that is definitely a part where, if you have the opportunity and you feel comfortable, you can share where you think federal policy needs to go, whether it's, whether it's greater investments in terms of funding, or maybe particular regulation issues that you're struggling with as it relates to your program. I will say that's definitely where National Skills Coalition comes in, is that you can tell your story and show your programs better than anybody. But if you need specific assistance on talking points as it relates to policy, so that when you do get to that point where the member says, well, how can I help, you can take full advantage of that opportunity. We can definitely help with that, the part about the talking points and helping you feel equipped to make any kind of policy ask if it gets to that point.
Great, thank you, Andrea. And I also want to remind everyone that if you have a question, please raise your hand and I will open up your lines one at a time. And it looks like we have a question from Christopher Barber, and Christopher asks, after the electoral races, when is the best time to contact our new elected officials? Should we wait a couple of months, or when should that contact be initiated once the candidate has won and is in office?
That's a great question. I would say immediately. There's going to be a time of transition with any office where the member is getting staffed up. They are getting assignments, and then they are needing to kind of get themselves acclimated to understanding, if it's a congressional office, understanding their district. If it's a gubernatorial office, there's a range of things they're going to be doing. There's a lot of staffing and briefing that goes on during the transition time. And I'd say that immediately following the election a great time. I really wouldn't wait, especially when it comes to gubernatorial races. In 2010, we had a number of state coalitions that actually used the election season to get in front of the candidates and ask them about their plans for skills, and then follow it up post-election with meetings with the transition team if they could arrange it, or putting together short policy papers on what they think the transition team should focus on, or how the governor's first 100 days or first term should go. And so a lot of that happened immediately following the election. So I would say don't wait. Start immediately. Know that it may take some time before you get a call or email return, but it's as the saying goes, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I will say that especially I think with any kind of office, it's transition time between after the election but before the term begins is a very hectic time, and a lot of times you really have to work your channels to figure out who has the best route to the candidate-elect, just so that, as you're trying to put that call in or schedule some sort of meeting or FaceTime, that, you don't get ignored or lost in the shuffle. So when you are reaching out, make sure that, you kind of do a relationship scan and try to figure out if you know somebody who knows somebody who has a pretty good connection with the candidate-elect, because that can help facilitate that meeting a lot earlier during the transition time. If you can work the connection and make it happen that way.
Thank you, Andrea.
But I would definitely say don't wait. Just get started as soon as you can.
Great, thank you. And we have a call from Scott Rogers. Scott asks, what are the best practices that we should emulate or bring to our local workforce investment board to contract for services?
Great. Angela, I don't know. I can start it, and if you want to add, feel free. I would just say that the types of policies that National Skills Coalition has championed for much of its history into present day have been practices that meaningfully engage employers into designing and implementing training programs, primarily through sector and industry partnerships. There's been strategies to help a broad array of workers enter and be successful in training programs. As we know, there's workers, especially adult workers, or workers who have barriers to the labor market, need a different level of assistance and nimbleness, and require a certain level of nimbleness in terms of designing and training programs so that they can enter and be successful while still working or juggling family or life responsibilities. They have specific financial need issues. They may have supportive services issues that all go into helping them be successful in their programs. So robust career strategies that take an account of designing programs to fit in a learner's life who's already working and juggling life responsibilities, that needs financial assistance in terms of training, and then that needs financial assistance to be successful in education and training, that could benefit from supportive services like transportation help or child care help with books and supplies. All of that, we would tout as a promising and promising practice for helping people get on the path towards earning skilled credentials. Angela, would there be anything else you would add to that?
No, I think that's exactly, yeah, I totally agree. The only thing I would add is that, if you're interested in drilling down a little bit more on more of the technical side of how some of these best practices are implemented in the field, National Skills Coalition has a pretty broad field, so we could also connect you with folks who we're working with who have been pretty successful. Also, we have a number of publications on our website that could do some good case studies on these types of things, like career pathways and sector partnerships that might be a good resource as well.
Great, thank you. So we have another question from Tony. And Tony asks, how do we raise the importance of community-based organizations?
I think it's a great question. I think oftentimes, as we've seen over the last couple of years, is that while we know that there are many different types of stakeholder groups that go into building a robust state and local training system, oftentimes community-based organizations are not the first ones thought of as being a major part of the system. People tend to think about apprenticeships or community colleges, but not necessarily community-based organizations. But what we know is that community-based organizations do play a very important role, not only in building and training workers for in-demand jobs and helping them get on the path towards earning skilled credentials, but also providing a lot of the supportive services, or at least brokering and connecting people with supportive services that allows them to enroll and complete their education training programs and not be hindered by things like lack of transportation or inconsistent child care or things like that. That being said, one of the two of the most powerful ways to make sure that gets across is, again, building a relationship with your member throughout the year, not just leaving it to one or two events a year, 1 or 2 times a year to try to get a meeting or get your member to come visit your site. I think that's the first step. I mean, a meeting or tour is a very powerful first step towards telling that story about the important role that community-based organizations play. But it continues from there. I mean, one of the easiest ways is just to make sure that your members, your congressional members and their staff are on your email list, so they're getting regularly updated about graduations that you have coming up, new classes that you're starting, new programs that are gearing up, new partners that you're working with. All of those things that they can see in real time and throughout the year is pretty important. Definitely giving space to create opportunities for your program participants or employers or other partners that you work with to accompany you on meetings or site visits is key too. So they see, so that other people can validate the role that community-based organizations are playing along with you in your meetings and your conversations with your members. That's pretty important too. Definitely here at National Skills Coalition, as you've heard earlier in the webinar, our coalition is broad, and one of our major partners among our members are community-based organizations. So as part of the work that we do is that we try to make sure that the policies that we rally around are policies that resonate with all members of our coalition, and that includes community-based organizations. So wherever possible, we try to make sure and we try to lift up the importance of all the major players of our workforce development system, not just 1 or 2, but we know that so many others go into making and keeping robust training systems going.
Great, thank you, Andrea. So I believe that is it for our question and answer portion. Thank you, everyone, for typing in and asking your questions.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Ashley, for facilitating the Q&A period. We just want to wrap up the webinar with some contact information for both Angela and myself. Of course, if you want to take a moment, we encourage you to go to our website, We actually just relaunched our website with some new and improved layout, so it's more nimble and easy to navigate around and easy to access information how and when you need it. So I encourage you to go to our website when you can and take a look. And again, if you're not already receiving our e-news or action alerts, you can go to our website and sign up for those as well. But if you have federal policy questions, anything related to the content that Angela shared, you'll see her contact information there. And of course, if you have any questions or want to get involved in any of the advocacy opportunities that I shared, whether it's getting hooked up with one of our state coalitions, making sure you receive an invitation to our skills summit, or getting involved in planning a site visit during the August recess, or working on gubernatorial candidate education activities, I can help you with all of that, or make sure you get connected with the right people where you need them. And you will see my contact information there as well. I just want to thank everyone for taking a moment out of your busy day, for joining us today. And thank you, Tony, for all your hard work in making this possible. And thank you all, and have a great rest of the week. Take care.